When I was about 12, my family and I moved into a house that was built back in the 80s. Even though it was well over 40 years old, it was still in pretty good condition. I'm an only child, so a house this big was just right for the family of 3. All of the bedrooms were upstairs, and me being the 12-year-old I requested to my parents that I get the room with the big window, and that room was huge. This will be important in the story later. Of course, they agreed, and within a month, we had officially moved in. My parents worked full-time and would often be out half the time. If there was nobody to watch me, my parents got a babysitter, but seeing I was getting older, they let me stay home alone. No matter what they were doing or where they were going, I always liked staying home. This might sound stupid to some, but I thought of myself as mature and responsible. One night, my dad had went to work overtime and my mom was going shopping. Now, my mom was the type of person who always stayed out late for things that should only take an hour or two. I'm sure some people can relate to this, but I didn't want to be involved in any of it. Anyway, 12-year-old me immediately hops onto Fortnite to play with some friends, the game that is practically taking over the world right now. While playing with one of my friends, I hear something hit my bedroom window from behind me. My headphones were in, but I could still hear it as it was extremely loud. I turn around and see a big crack in the window. I figure that someone has thrown a decent-sized rock at my window. I was pissed, so I log out of Fortnite and get up to see what hit my window. I look down below and see a man dressed in all black looking up at me, waving. Caution started to creep in amongst me, so I immediately run to my dad's office and call my parents from the home phone. Yes, we were the 1% of people who still had one. I called my mom and she said that she was coming home now and to lock all the doors and hide if necessary. I hid under my bed and I started to hear bangs hitting on our front door. The guy was trying to bust down our door and do God knows what to me. At this point, I'm under my bed, convinced I was going to die. But then I heard sirens in the distance, and 2 police cars pulled up to my house and arrested the man. Turns out, a neighbor had seen this man trying to bust down our front door and called the police. I will never forget the look the man gave me as he was forced into the back seat of the police car. It was a look of pure hatred and anger. Like the first thing he would do once he got out of jail would be to come back for me. It's been 4 years now, and I'm now 16. I hope I never see that man again. This took place when I was living with my uncle back in the late summer of 2016. I'm a huge Pokemon fan, and when Pokemon Go released, my friends and I were obsessed with it. In fact, we became so obsessed with it that we ended up going onto private property just to catch a certain Pokemon, only to end up getting in trouble for it. Needless to say, I played the game around my neighborhood all the time. One day, I was walking through my neighborhood searching for more Pokemon, but my luck had run out because there was not a single one in sight. Therefore, I decided to walk over a few blocks down to the next town over, and lo and behold, there was a Dragonite nearby. I followed it to where it was, and it led me to an open field. I'd like to mention that this town wasn't the nicest nor the safest, as you'd sometimes hear gunshots, and sirens would often be heard at least once a week. But being a 15-year-old kid minding his business, I figured no one would seem to care that I was here. It was about to rain and the sky was clouded, so I knew I had to catch the Dragonite fast. Needless to say, I caught it, and I was the most thrilled 15-year-old on the block. That's when I look up ahead and notice an object in the field by a secluded house. This was strange because we always drive past this field and have never seen this. Being the curious kid I was, I walk over into the tall grass, and as I got closer, I realized that it's a truck with all its doors open, a Ford F-150 to be exact. The strange thing about it was the fact that it looked completely brand new and didn't have a scratch on it. It was as if you took a brand new truck, drove it into the field, and got out. I began looking through the windows to see if I could see anything, but I didn't. Just some empty beer bottles and a few papers. Suddenly, a loud scream coming from somewhere in the field startled me. To be honest, I don't know if it was a man or a woman, but the scream was nothing like I've ever heard before. It sounded like a person who was deranged, and I got the hell out of there fast. By the time I got home, my uncle wasn't there, and I didn't hear anything for the rest of the day. Alright, so this happened about 3 years ago, right at the height of Pokemon Go's popularity. I played it often with my fiance, Luke. We decided to get clever, and instead of walking to make our eggs grow or whatever, I would just drive around the residential streets slowly, about 15 miles per hour. We always drove the same path, and we did this several times. At the time, we lived in a very small one traffic light town. The town was primarily low-income families, and you would mostly see people coming and going from time to time. We usually played Pokemon at around 10 or 11 p.m., as did several other locals, and without any other entertainment, it was a fairly popular game around town. This one particular night, I'm driving the normal path with Luke. We're catching sick Pokemon left and right and hatching eggs like crazy. We paused in the water department's parking lot to catch our 217th Ikon. We drive for about another 10 more minutes and park next to an empty lot. Across the street is a normal residential landscape with houses and whatnot. So I'm catching my first Pikachu, stoked as hell, when some guy drives by in a beat-up silver SUV. He slows down and asks me if I'm, quote, okay. I smiled and flashed my phone screen and told him that we were just playing Pokemon. He said something like, oh, okay, have a good one. But he seemed weird. I don't know why, but he gives off such an unsettling vibe. So we leave and make our last loop around the neighborhood, pausing as we go to collect various Pokemon. About 15 minutes later, we were back by the empty lot because there's another Pokemon. Suddenly, the house across the street starts pointing beams of light at me. Very small and very bright. It was weird, so Luke and I noped out of there, and as soon as we did, the beat-up silver SUV is behind us. In fact, I didn't even realize anything was wrong at first. He pulls up next to me, and I can only see a male driving and a female passenger. The driver is shining a blinding light at me through his window as we drive. At this point, I'm simply pissed. I'm a confident person, but I'm not a confident driver, and had no idea as to why these people were messing with us. But I do know that it's the same guy that asked if I was okay earlier. I don't want to drive home because I don't want to lead these people to my house, but I had no idea what else to do. I decided to drive to the police station, but there was no one there. The parking lot was empty, the lights were off, and there was not a single soul in sight. We have 2 police officers in the town, so we figured they must have been out patrolling. I was raised in a large city, so living in a tiny town and no police at the station was so foreign to me. I had no clue what to do, so I drove to the little hospital and managed to lose them. My fiancé and I immediately changed seats without speaking, and we sat there for about a good 15 seconds and then pulled out. He's behind us again, and this time he's aggressive. I called 911 at this point and began crying to the dispatch, telling them that a crazy guy is following us. At this point, Luke is flying through the town at random. He's running through red lights, speeding 70 plus in residential areas, tearing through people's lawns. It was seriously as insane as it sounds. Everywhere we went, he went too. Every time we sped up, he did too. We had no idea what he wanted, but we knew he wanted to hurt us. At one point, we were tearing through yards in my car, no fences, and the guy manages to box us in. Immediately upon stopping, the guy jumps out, as does his female passenger, and 2 very large male passengers in the back seat. Luke immediately pulls out his gun and points at them and screams, "Get back! Get back in the car!" They all bolt back to their vehicle and take off. I'm absolutely shaking and sobbing at this point, talking to the operator, and the lady finally asks me where I want to meet the cops. I tell her the local gas station. Needless to say, we are there within 20 seconds, as are the cops. This town is seriously so small. I don't even know how the cops didn't see us or intervene while we destroyed dozens of yards at midnight. Seconds after we pull in, so does the SUV. The guy jumps out and begins to rush over to my car. Cops stop him and they talk to him for a while. We're just in our car shaking. The older cop finally walks over to us and says, "So, did one of you guys pull a gun on him tonight?" We were shocked. That is the only thing he asked us. Being honest, we told him yes and explained everything that had happened. Cops went and talked to him again, came back, and basically said that this guy thought we were casing his house because he kept seeing our vehicle pass it. The cop told us that we were lucky that he decided not to press charges because Luke pulled out his gun. My car had decent damage from driving through trees and bushes, and I was pretty sure the guys were going to beat our asses. We were so scared and shaken up that we didn't argue on anything and left when they allowed us to. We went home and stayed up literally all night long, taking turns peeking out our window. We were convinced that they were going to drive around, find my car, and harass us. The next day, we had installed a high-tech security system. I have since seen the guy and girl several times as I worked at the school and they had young children. I had never seen or interacted with them prior to this day or after, but I know they knew who I was, so I'm glad I don't live there anymore. I also never played Pokemon Go after that night.
I used to live in a housing complex when I was 15 right outside of Chicago. The area we lived in was pretty big for its size, so that meant there was plenty of space to go do exercise and walk around. Oftentimes I'd always go out for a walk around our community, mostly for doing exercise just to keep my physical health at a decent level. During this time I was still well into high school, and this was also around the time Pokemon Go was rising. I wasn't that big of a gamer, but my friends kept pushing me to get the game. After practically pushing me to play it, I finally installed the app, and I must admit, it was pretty fun. In fact, I became so attached to it that I would sometimes procrastinate and skip homework just to play the game. One evening after getting home from school, I decided to take a walk around our complex like I do every day. It was one of my favorite Pokemon, so I followed it, and it led me straight into the wooded area by my house. Needless to say, I caught the Snorlax and added it to my collection when I look up to see someone walking in circles about 30 or so feet away from me. Whoever it was walking in a very abnormal way. Their arms swung back and forth, and they lifted their legs up one at a time, similar to a soldier marching. I found it a bit funny at first, but then they stopped and turned directly towards me. By this point it's almost dark out, so I couldn't see his face since he was too far. All of a sudden he starts charging directly at me while letting out a short, ear-piercing scream like a madman. I booked it back in the other direction. I did track for a few years, so I had some experience while running, but this guy was fast as shit. I didn't even hesitate, I just kept running, eventually making it back to the main roads and to my house. Thankfully I wasn't followed, and I never saw him again. So this story takes place back in late 2016, the year Pokemon Go came out, and at the time the game had a huge hype around it. So me being a teenager who wanted to play what everyone else was playing, I got the game myself and enjoyed it. One of my friends also played the game, and we had the idea of having a sleepover at my house and have our own Pokemon adventure together. We both thought it was going to be a lot of fun, so we got it organized, and my friend, who I will call Dan, stayed over at my house. Throughout the day, we messed around, ate snacks, played video games on my PS4, and etc. It was at 10 p.m. when Dan suggested we go out and play Pokemon Go. I brought up that it was too late, but he persisted. So I asked my mom if it was fine. She said it was, but to be back at a reasonable time, just casual parent rules. Sure, I had my concerns and all, but honestly I thought nothing bad would happen. This was due to the fact I lived in a small and quiet town. No one would be out this late, so it wasn't like we were going to get mugged in an alleyway. We grabbed our phones and headed off down the main street of my town and walked past the cemetery, then past the football oval. But as we passed the football oval, we saw a black Ford Territory parked by it. Its lights were turned off, so we didn't think anyone was inside. When we walked past it, we got into the footpath past the oval when we noticed the Ford pull up next to us on the footpath. We found it strange but kept walking anyway. We were passing the post office when we saw the same Ford pull into the car park in front of the post office. This gave us a suspicion that this random car was following us. We kept walking, but at a faster pace. We walked past the post office and were now walking past our town park. As we were walking by the park, Dan told me to go hide behind the bushes, which surrounded the park entrance. As we crouched down behind the bushes, we saw the Ford pull up at the park entrance, confirming 100% that this Ford was following us. After what felt like an eternity for me, the Ford drove off and we got out of the park and started running back to my house. As we started running back to my house, I looked behind me to make sure the Ford was gone, and what I saw horrified me. The car turned left at the end of the street. I originally thought that maybe he was just leaving the town, but then I realized this park has two main entrances. The way he turned indicated that he was driving to the second entrance, meaning he believed we ran to the other side of the park and was trying to cut us off that way. There was no argument left. This guy wasn't following us for safety purposes or etc. He was chasing us. I am not an athletic person, unlike my friend Dan, but in that instant I was keeping up with him from the sheer fear of what will happen if this driver caught us or what his intentions were. We ran past the post office, past the football oval, and were halfway past the cemetery when we saw the headlights of the Ford behind us, and I was terrified. There was nowhere to hide. It was a footpath with a giant fence separating the footpath and the cemetery. There was nothing to hide behind. Luckily enough, Dan came up with an idea. He pointed out we were both wearing dark hoodies. He said to put the hood over our heads, crouch down, and pretend to be rocks. At the time I thought it was a stupid idea, but that was all we had, so we did just that, pretended to be rocks, and the Ford drove past us, not slowing down at all, which meant this stupid plan actually worked. After he drove by, we continued booking it. We were at the end of the cemetery when we saw him driving our way again. By some stroke of luck, he didn't see us, but we thankfully got to my house and locked the door behind us. We explained to my mom what happened, and after that day, she made some new rules. No more playing Pokemon Go at night, and my little sister was not allowed to go out by herself to play it. She wasn't happy about that, but at least we are still here to tell the story.